And we are live. Hey, everyone. Welcome to TTSN, the Transformational Squirrel Network, where we make shift happen. Tonight,
Sorry.
Cindy's going to introduce our guest.
So tonight we have Sheena Blackmore with us, and she's a catalyst for change and transformation. She's a midwife of the soul, helping others navigate darkness and transitioning them through liminal spaces with courage and grace. And Sheena and her husband actually own a bed and breakfast out in BC. And she also offers yoga online, coaching, and counseling. So welcome, Sheena, and we're so excited to share you with our audience. And we would love to start out by having you share with us what put you on your healing journey and brought you to where you are today.
Okay, so the first thing that comes to mind for me actually goes further back than where I would have normally started my story over the last several years of my life. Like throughout my 20s, I always started the story at when I lost my brother to suicide in 2002. But in lieu or light of the current situation with the First Nations and the residential school stuff that's come up, it's kind of triggered memories for me way back to when I was like 11 or 12 years old. And having a really like strong desire for spirituality in my life. So I was raised or baptized Catholic and would go to church every Sunday with my mom. And around, I'd say, I think it was around 11 or 12, I might have been a little bit older, but I started to feel a strong resistance just to like the parroting kind of actions of the church. Like I didn't really understand why. I wanted to know why we were saying what we were saying. What were why were we just like standing up and sitting down and standing up and sitting down? Why did I have to confess my sins to a priest? You know, so I started to kind of resist and struggle with that a little bit at quite a young age, but it was just sort of a natural resistance or a natural inquiry. And then I wanted to go and sit in other churches. So, you know, I guess that I don't know what triggered it. It could have been an alignment in the stars for all I know, but something around that age got me a little bit more like I had this natural inclination towards feeling maybe a spirituality over religion and wanting to explore that, and I felt really, really connected or really drawn to the image of Christ and the image of Mary as images, but I didn't really feel connected necessarily to the church itself as an institution or, you know, the dogma or the rituals. But I would just stare at the stained glass window of Christ there with the heart, the flame heart, you know, and Mary, and I loved them. I would just meditate on those images. So in my teenage years, I would go to church twice because I had to go to church with my mom, but then I would go with my friends to the Protestant Full Gospel Church as well, where it was a lot about like devotion and singing and praise and worship. And there was just more of a, for me at the time, like a heart connection. When you're singing, you're connecting to the heart. And it was very devotional, which is similar to the path of bhakti in yoga, which is the devotional, it's a devotional path. It's the chanting of mantras and directing your sentiments that you can't necessarily express in words towards the divine through song or through mantra. So I've always connected, I guess, from a yogic perspective with that lineage or with the tradition of bhakti yoga, which is a devotional path. So I would say that's sort of what's come into my memory as of late with just what's been coming up and thinking back to when I felt a little bit rebellious towards the Catholic Church. And I'm not like, I have good memories there too. And I did feel a connection to God and to, you know, Christ and Mary, as I said, while I was in the church. So to me, it was a place that I also felt good, but it was there was just something there for me at the time that I questioned, and then it left for a while, probably in my teenage years, and then it came back again. You know, the seeking when my brother passed away. So, and then after that is a whole nother ride and a whole nother journey. But that would have been the beginning point, I think. And then I think we all could think back to times when we were children, when we had these connections more naturally as well. So it could go back to previous lifetimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a never-ending story.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
How old were you when you lost your brother?
I was 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the yoga that you do, you say you call it therapeutic yoga, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you call it? So can you describe to us what it all entails? Like what can you get from doing yoga?
So the approach, the word therapeutic, I don't know, it's just kind of a word that I use to differentiate the difference between being in a public large class with all these different types of body mind constitutions and needs and requirements, where you can't meet the individual need of each person in the class. So I use the term yoga therapy or therapeutic yoga to differentiate between more of the one-on-one approach, where you're dealing with the unique person. They have their own kind of way of thinking, way of moving throughout the world, a different body constitution. And so from an Ayurvedic perspective, prescribing yoga was done this way. It was, because we have different requirements. So again, from the Ayurvedic perspective, it's a very elemental based approach. They use the science or the philosophy or theory of the 5 sacred elements to identify the ratio of elements that work for the person. So someone might have a more fiery mind, but a more earth water body, or a very earth water mind, but a fiery physical constitutional makeup. Or maybe an airy mind, like that squirrel energy is represented by the air element. And someone can have a mind that really is governed by the air element, but in their body, they look like an earth element. They could be more muscular or more just have more weight or tissue on their body, more that mama earth kind of presence in their physical constitution, but their mind could be a little bit more whirly or tornado-y or just swift. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just quick thinking. Creative mind is represented by the air element. So when you prescribe yoga, you can choose asanas or postures that help to balance out anything that is in excess and to increase what's in a deficient state, you might say. And that's just how you work on that elemental basis. And part of it's intuition, and getting to know the client, getting to know a little bit of their history, a little bit of their life story, what trying to get a sense of where they were at maybe when they were born, and then based on the conditioning and life's experiences and traumas, like what came out of balance, and then how to bring us back. And with the idea in mind that we can all strive for more of a tridoshic, it's called, or like a balanced constitution, where we're not really governed by one or the other. We might have an inclination towards that, but it becomes something that we feel masterful over, and it can become like a superpower. So rather than feeling like a victim to, let's say, if we have a lot of fire, so we're triggered easily to anger or rage or, have a temper. If we know that about ourselves and recognize that fire is a more predominant energy, and we learn to master that, then it's no longer something that we need to experience as an excess or something that we feel a victim to, but more empowered by. And then we, through what we choose to eat, what we choose to watch, listen to, our activities, the asanas or the yoga postures that we pick, we can, decide, do I want to increase my fire? Do I want to take it down? And so eventually we can really become balanced. No one is just fixed or stuck with what they were born, because that will be also determined by the parents and what they ate and the season you were born in, and your birth chart, the position of the planets at the time of your birth, all of those things, they're not fixed, but they're like a map to help you develop self-mastery and come to a place of balance or equanimity or equilibrium, so that you can be a fire person when you need to, you can be a water person or an earth person or an air person when you need to. You can understand how to choreograph with the energies of your environment, with what it is that you're experiencing or feeling or sensing. And you can kind of work like a magician, or your own shaman, to choreograph these energies and help to bring yourself into a state of balance, or understand what the medicine is if you're working within an environment while you're in a relationship or relating to another, or simply just going through your own stuff. You can choose, the appropriate medicine to help bring you into a state of greater balance and feeling more centered and in the heart.
Wow.
Can you
That's beautiful.
give an example of each, like of how a person might act, or how they would know if they are fire, or how they would know if they're water or air or earth? Could you give us an example of each of those? Something that they might do, or something, a way they might look, or?
There's lots of tests online. And I also want to say that I don't have any really formal training in Ayurveda. I did sort of dive into it for a while when I was seeking to understand a little bit more of the source of where yoga came from. And so yoga is just a branch of Ayurveda. So Ayurveda sort of was here, and then it umbrellas out, and there's so many different branches. And so yoga is just one arm of the branch. So, or of the sort of the source. Ayurveda means science of life. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that yoga led to wanting to get a little bit closer to the source of where this tradition came from. And I did meet an Ayurvedic physician and a therapist, and learned a lot just by interacting with them and going through some Ayurvedic cleansing treatments and experiences with them on my own healing journey. And as a massage therapist, kind of naturally picked up some of and as a yoga teacher, naturally started to integrate those things into my practice. So I just wanted to say that a lot of what I'm sharing isn't, it's not coming from a formal background, but just from my experience and just observing and studying it through life. So they're called the doshas, I'll say first of all. And so this is something that you can definitely look up. And they're divided into 3 categories. So you have vata, which is spelled V-A-T-A, pitta, which is P-I-T-A. It might have 2 T's, I can't remember. And then kapha, or some people say kapha, and that's K-A-P-H-A. And so the vata dosha is predominantly air space element. Okay, the kapha or kapha is water and earth, and pitta is fire. So that's just sort of the basic. When you're born, you will have a ratio of vata, pitta, kapha. Okay. Now, an example of let's say a predominantly vata constitution would be someone who's very etheric, creative, light, mobile, swift, quick. They also may come across as not being grounded, a little bit flighty, harder to stay in their body. And this is if they have a high percentage of vata, or they're in like a vata imbalanced state. Or dry skin. They might suffer from dry skin. So because if you think of the airspace element, just what that does in nature. So if we have too much air, the earth starts to dry up and crack. There's not enough moisture in the earth to keep it, the soil really moist. Okay, so you just look to nature to really understand and kind of relate. The wind picking up could really aggravate someone with a high Vata constitution. Okay, it could make them feel really like scattered. So air and space also represent the mind and our thoughts. So we can recognize when we're experiencing a little bit of a Vata imbalance, when we feel like the tornado mind is going and we're not able to ground. Okay, so that's an indicator
Squirrel.
of Vata. Yeah. But I love that you brought in transformational network right after that, because transformation is fire is responsible for transformation. And so you're not just, you're bringing in more of a balance. It's not just about the squirrely, you're bringing in the fire element there as well. And then network, that's a little bit more space, but there's ways you can see how this can translate into every area of life. Like words will have, an energetic that feels elemental that you'll be able to identify, or, animals you'll start to see. So the kapha, so that's the earth and water combination. And so someone with a kapha, let's say body type, because that is the earth. So that's why I went to the body. You can see that when I was talking about Vata, I was talking more about the mental kind of state. When I moved into Kapha, I came to the body. But someone's body with predominantly Vata energy will look thin, tall, maybe long limbs. So you can get the idea. And then Kapha will be someone maybe who struggles with their weight. The musculature and the really like kind of muscly body constitution likely will have more pitta in it, but not necessarily. The big boned person will be maybe more kapha in their body constitution. In their mind, that would look like someone who's very calm, easygoing, sweet, non-confrontational. Yeah, someone who can really just kind of go with the flow. They feel very grounded. They kind of pause or think before they speak. Does that you're getting a feeling for that? But they could have that in their mind, like a mental constitution there, but their body could look differently and be more of a Vata type, let's say. Okay, and then Pitta we kind of touched on. Physically, they're going to be like the athletic look, that the athlete or the athletic body, muscular. They could suffer from things like ulcers or indigestion, anything fiery. You can relate, or inflammation, those kinds of things. And they might get aggravated in the heat if there's too much, the temperature outside is too hot, or they get too hot, they could be aggravated and get kind of frustrated or angry. Mentally, Pitta mind, again, so the more positive or balanced qualities would be intellect. Okay, so sharp intellect. I'm having trouble thinking of that one more because I always jump to the more imbalanced or triggering energies of like quick to anger, frustrated, but just there's a sharpness to their intellect and their mind. So they could be more like knowledge or study, based. And these are just sort of guesses. Don't quote me on that, but it's an invitation for all of us to inquire, like, what would a fiery mind, when in balance, how would that look? Someone maybe who can easily transform, a negative thought into a positive thought. If you think of the quality of transformation, so that might be something.
Right.
So those are just some general examples.
And so when you work with a client, do you have like an interview process or a way to know what they need in their yoga practice?
Yeah, so like I said, there's lots of tests online that you can find, and they're called like an Ayurvedic dosha test. Dosha is spelled DOSHA. And they could fill one out online and come to me with, the results of that questionnaire. But generally, I don't have people fill that out. I work more intuitively and through my sense perception. So I can obviously see their body shape. Once I start talking to them, I can get a sense of where they're at mentally, which will change, right? So we know that we've changed since we were this age to this age to this age, and that's the power of that's the empowerment of working with the elements. So I just really work with people in the moment, how they show up, because the body also changes, and then the seasons change. So you're also working with, like in the winter, you might do a little bit of a fiery practice, work with the warrior postures, to create some heat in the body. So it's intuitive. We might start talking about diet, and I'm not a nutritionist, but you can get a sense of what needs to happen when you just investigate what is like the elements. It's when you start asking, does this food feel like it's air, space, fire, or kapha, the earth, water? You get a sense, you get a feeling. About what it is. So if you're feeling heavy and lethargic in the body and you're struggling with your weight, then you're not going to want to choose really viscous, cooked, hot, oily foods, because that is, like in Ayurveda, like increases like, and the opposite decreases.
Okay.
Okay. So if you're someone who struggles with frustration, maybe inflammation, where you can't sit still and you always got to be really active using your body and you're pushing, so that's a mental energy of the pitta as well. Like someone who just like that, they always are goal oriented, like they're always pushing and kind of forcing and striving. And so if you can see that, then you know that it's going to be a struggle for them to just sit in a posture and hold it for 5 minutes, and stretch the muscles, right? And so that will be what's uncomfortable for them, but likely the medicine that would bring them into a greater state of balance to decrease their pitta a little bit and increase a little bit more of maybe the kapha quality in mind, and in body, because that would also mean greater flexibility.
Right.
So it really is just responding to the energy of the moment and their life as it is now. So that just involves a discussion and an open dialogue for the first couple of sessions until we get to know each other a little bit. We might pause in the middle of a class and talk about something, or things come up, and then we start by sharing and then move into the session after that. So, and then I'll always ask, what do you feel you need? And we tune into the body. And then I design a practice based on what it is that they feel in their body. My hips are tight, or this or that. And it can be just really practical, but they're getting everything else and all the wisdom that comes along with that as they move in. And once in a while, just kind of, I interweave, that knowledge in there, but yeah.
Okay.
So that's how I work.
Sorry. I do want to know too about your space, because right now you have an incredible mystical mountain space. And so your bed and breakfast, is that where you do your work out of if you're one-on-one, if you're actually working directly with a client when everything opens up and you're working with somebody, or is most of your work done virtually?
Well, lately it's been mostly virtually. Yeah. Recently I've opened up the month of June to doing private sessions, and I'm booking up. So they're one-on-one and in person here at the space, mostly for locals, obviously, because the travel is still a little bit vague for a lot of people. But yeah, so both. It is obviously nice to be together, but the very first time when we were kind of forced to move everything online, I wasn't sure how I'd like it, but it's surprising how if the setup is good and I can see the full body, so that matters, you know, taking that into account, that you're not right up close to the screen, and because I to be able to see, but through verbal cues and instruction, we're able to it feels like we're in the same space. So it's been in my experience so far just as effective. The only thing that it's lacking is perhaps like the physical adjustments that could be made, you know, where I could help the person. But I find that it's really been neat to encourage people to trust themselves more. Like I'll ask them just to really, really listen to my instruction and my voice. And then they feel it out from the inside out, what it is. And so in a way, it invites a more subtle exploration of their own bodies instead of me just putting their, you know, pulling on their knee there a little bit or their hips there, because then there's a disconnect. I'm doing it for them. So in a way, it's been neat to observe how perhaps that's better. And maybe one-on-one now, the odd time I might do an adjustment just because it could help them to realize where they can go. But otherwise, it's nice just to really think for yourself, you know, and figure it out for yourself. And I feel that's actually strengthening the link between the body and the mind more. So now that I think about it. So yeah.
Oh,
So for some of our audience that maybe haven't done yoga, can you maybe touch in on some of the benefits, you know, the cellular memory stuff and just what it can do for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just go with what comes to mind. It's maybe a little bit of a story more than anything else about my personal experience, but it will highlight how yoga can benefit our lives. One of my first, you know, I maybe did a handful of yoga classes, but it was within that very first introduction to yoga that I had several emotional releases. And this was about 3 years after my brother passed away, maybe. So it was really quite fresh. And I was young and didn't have a lot of tools at the time. And so it was just like this phenomenal realization of what gets stored in the body and how movement is so important for release. And it's hard to put into words, but it was like in those moments I knew that there was something greater than myself at play, and that yoga was like this magical thing, and that it wasn't just postures, but it was connected to a lineage. It was connected to a wisdom tradition or a consciousness, that just by putting yourself in the postures that have been practiced for 10,000 years, or not 10,000, 4,000 years, it could be 10,000. Maybe I said that for a reason. But yeah, that something can happen when you repeat over thousands of years. You know, a certain energy gets built up, and when you decide to step into or onto a path, that you get everything that comes along with that, not just in this moment, but forward and back in time. And so that was just a big kind of insight, and it made me I wanted to become a teacher right away. I wanted or just study. Everyone says this. I've heard everyone say this, that decide they want to teach. Like, I want to take a teacher training, not because I want to teach, but just because I want to deepen my practice. And I said the same thing. And then you always end up teaching because you learn more through teaching eventually, you know, and then you kind of step back and forth between teacher-student roles. But so it, for one, it can facilitate emotional release where you feel stuck, and it just doesn't seem like doing the mental kind of investigation or the psychological work is not really working for you. There you can get kind of reeling around a hamster wheel and not move anywhere. And so literally inviting movement into the body can facilitate movement of the emotion or the stuck or bring the memory to the surface so that you can actually see what was stuck there. Often there's a memory, a visual, a thought, like some wording, a sensation that invokes like a memory. There's something that will accompany your experience, or thoughts that will lead up to the emotional release, which will give you clues to the specific, but it's not always necessary that you know. And for me at that time, there was just so much trapped emotion, because I didn't really likely know how to process that well, what happened to my brother and our family, that it just needed to be like a floodgate, that opened up. And then only after that did I start exploring the link between our thoughts and our emotions. And I did take some work around cellular memory and emotional intelligence, and the link between the two. So that's what I also invite people to do during their yoga practice one-on-one, is to pay attention to what's coming up, for them, and just to observe that, if they're, because all the answers are there. If there's a question, it's there, but we need to kind of move around and investigate. If we want movement forward, we need to move our bodies. It's a part of who we are. And I think in the spiritual community, we can often get so much just talking philosophy and ideas and tools about how to work with things, and we can use them, but it still can be a lot of like that ether, or that, mental, or even feeling, which is, brings us into our body a little bit more. But yeah, there's just something there about, I feel it's necessary to really integrate the body into these practices as well. It feels relevant, and especially now with all this stuff in the culture kind of coming to the surface, we kind of want to see the mirror and also go along with the time. What we're being asked to do is also like I always felt and sort of acknowledge that we are mini earths, so this body, like whatever's happening in the collective, whatever we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. Whatever we do to ourselves, we do to the earth. It just seems really essential that if we're going to kind of create a new earth and reclaim our body sovereignty, or step into a fully integrated being, we have to include the physical. We have to understand this physical mechanism that is miraculous and operates without us having to do much. But to me, like, why not honor it by exploring it, and by moving it, and by being in it, and loving it as much as we love spirituality, or loving it as much as we love learning. How there's an interesting relationship we've had with like exercise and the body, and a lot of it has been disjointed and fragmented and unhealthy, like especially in the West. And so I think aversions are there for, that have just been passed along. Plus there's been a lot of abuse and trauma that we're meant to be looking at, our ancestral stuff, and it's stored in the body. That's, the body is a huge way of how we can access that. So if that's something you want to explore, it's time to explore what's in your DNA, what's in your cellular structure. I'm just going off. Like, I'm not a scientist. I'm not really a fact person. Like I said, this is just sort of what I'm sharing off the top of, from my heart, and just flowing with the thoughts that are coming. But it feels really relevant and important that we stay in the body, because if we don't, we'll just continue to disconnect from the trauma, because that's where the trauma is stored.
Right. And that's the first thing that we want to do, right, is run from, oh boy, there's that feeling. I want to run, right? It's one of those, we want to run. In our conversations prior to
there's
tonight,
a bit of a choppiness.
oh, sorry. It's a little delayed, I guess. Hey. Prior to tonight, our conversations, in somewhere in there, you said, with yoga, you experience pain and pleasure simultaneously. And I'd like you to just speak into, like how, if we have injuries or trauma that's stored in our body, like, can you just speak into, how it can be related to different diseases and, different symptoms that we're experiencing, and how we can, reduce symptoms in maybe something that we've been holding on to for a very long time and not even realize that it's, connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the thing, again, I'm just kind of going with what the first thing that comes to mind around emotion, because that's typically how the emotion seems to be the thing that we run away from, especially if it feels unpleasant or we label it as unpleasant feeling to us. So one thing that's always helped me is to recognize that emotion is just energy in motion. Okay, so if you break up the word, we use the E as a symbol for energy, and dash and motion. So if you remember that equation, emotion is energy in motion, you can start to explore observing the sensations that you feel as energy rather than labeling it as an emotion. And recognize that somewhere there's a gateway to your liberation. And so if you're willing to feel the sensation, you'll realize that it's impermanent, so in yoga, let's say you're in a forward bend, often the hamstrings are really tight, and it's uncomfortable and it can be painful. But if you study the sensation like a scientist, if you observe it and you feel it like a scientist, you might observe that at the beginning of your forward bend, it felt like a knife cutting through your hamstrings. And then a few breaths later, it shifted to like a tingling sensation down into your feet. And then a few seconds later, the pain shifted into your hip. And then 2 minutes later, you were able to reach further to your toes. And so that's the invitation, like in our daily lives as well, when we feel something that's unpleasant or painful, when we can observe it. I say pleasure and pain are found simultaneously because there is a pleasure in knowing that it's not permanent and that it will shift, and eventually it's almost like realizing the law of impermanence, that nothing is a threat. So, but we want to run because we feel threatened that it's going to stay, we'll get trapped in that feeling or it won't go away. So that's why yoga is so helpful. It's a metaphor that we can take off the mat and into our lives. So that's why going into postures, and it's not about like no pain, no gain, but if you apply this approach, it's actually a very compassionate and gentle approach. And you're just observing the sensation for what it is rather than labeling it as, I don't like this. This feels painful. It's like, oh no, it's hot. It's moving, it's prickling, it's tingling, and it becomes more of an objective study. And then it's not personal. We also, where we take things personally, like even the fact these are my hamstrings, this is my body. The more attached we are to the identity or the identifying as our bodies, and that equals something. So if I have pain in my body, that means that I'm not fit, or that means that I failed myself in some way. We take the body so personally, and that's not to say we don't love and take care of it personally, like really love it, but like there's just, do you understand the difference? We want to, it doesn't mean that we just detach entirely and say that this body isn't mine, but anything that we have, we want to care for. deeply, you know, and not neglect. And so it's, if it's as simple as like loving an object that you have, you know, you dust it, you take care of it, you keep it in a special place. Like, it's approaching the body in the same way, and just stepping outside a little bit, which allows you to love yourself through that. And then that's what dissolves, you know, that's what helps to facilitate the release and the dissolve and bring you back into, you know, a place of pleasure or bliss or peace. So the trick is, the trick truly is is that we want to observe the pleasure, the bliss, and the joy in the same way. We want to observe the sensation for what it is and not cling to it. So it is a practice of observing what we experience more objectively, but that's not to say we don't feel or don't have emotions. But we just step outside and feel it for what it is and get a little bit less clingy to our identifying or labeling the things that we are experiencing. Just feel the sensations. Notice how you feel, but allow those sensations to come and go, to arise and pass away as easily as the breath comes in and moves out through the nose. And the more we can practice that, the more we can step into the full, like, realized moments of impermanence. You know, it doesn't stick around. And the why we suffer is because when we're joyful, we want it to stay forever. And when we feel bliss, we want it to stay forever. And then it goes away. We can count on change. We can count on impermanence. That's a constant. Yes. It's a natural law, you know? And so just accept, once we can do that, then it's like we're not so rocked, you know, by the winds of change or the turbulent waters. We can just kind of feel and observe. That's the mantra. Feel the physical sensations and observe. Feel the breath and observe the breath. So I always say you have two jobs in yoga, and one is to feel and observe your breath coming in and out through the nose. Feel and observe the sensations, the physical sensations that are happening throughout the body. And that's it. Feel and observe breath and body sensation. And that alone is just a hugely enlightening practice and liberating practice. And you'll find that, you know, you practice it on the mat, but you'll find that you can start to do it, you know, in more and more moments throughout your life. And then the reason I say, like, this is emotion or feeling is the gateway or the channel to truth, you know, because there's a bit of distortion where we are really emotional, you know, the truth can be distorted, and we become emotional because of what our thoughts are thinking, telling, deciding. Right? So first it's the thought, because it's the most subtle form of elemental energy. Okay. And then comes the physical sensation. And it's the physical sensation that we react to. But the physical sensation, the quality of the physical sensation occurs because of the quality of the thought that happened in the first place, which was a conditioned response to something. Based on the past, not on the moment. Not on the moment. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes, it's linking something from the past, an emotion from the past, to the situation in the present, which you don't even know why you're upset about what's happening right now, but it's linked to something that's happened in the past, or that emotion is the same as something that's happened in the past. Yeah. You know, Eckhart Tolle had said, and you brought it up. Sorry, I've got the sun shining just at the wrong spot at the wrong time. So Eckhart Tolle had said that, you know, it doesn't matter if something appears to be positive or something appears to be negative. If it appears to be negative, this too will pass. If it appears to be positive, this too will pass. So never get yourself attached to one or the other, whether you perceive it to be one way or another. It's truly not either. It just is. So,
and it makes sense too that I think this would really help with like even addictions or cravings or that kind of thing too, right? How, that is something that happened and we grabbed onto something and that became our uh, validity or whatever you want to say for that, right? That's okay. I need to eat chocolate when this happens, or I need to smoke when that happens, or whatever, right? And so really coming in contact with whatever it is that's stored in your body. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Now, the yoga that you do, as we were talking a little bit earlier, isn't full yoga stretches, poses. That's not the kind of yoga that you're necessarily talking about right now, right? It's more subtle yoga. Can you kind of describe that a little bit?
Yeah, it's sort of a preference and a response to what I feel is needed now. I mean, so it's just a little bit, it's slower moving, it's lower to the ground, it's really mindful, and the invitation is a lot, like I said, it's to feel and observe, because we want to use yoga as a channel to liberate ourselves, not just to exercise and get strong and flexible, which does translate to the mind and the heart as well. But yeah, so it's a bit more like a journey, like a physical shamanic journey that I feel like I'm more holding space for at the moment. But we still do asanas, one-on-one. Like I said, if I'm teaching to a group, I keep it pretty general, and we focus on opening up the spine and just doing some gentle exercises to liberate any tightnesses, that restrict our breathing, and we open up the limbs. So I make sure that the arms and the legs, there's something there to kind of open up those channels, because when they're blocked, then the trunk of the body gets blocked, and then that's when we start to really vibrate on a stressful level, and our chakras and all our energy centers get all kind of clogged up or out of balance. So the limbs are really a focal point, because I always say, if you imagine that your limbs are like the rivers that lead to the ocean, which is the trunk of the body, if there was a dam in the river, then it would start to back up and clog up, the ocean, let's say. So that's just sort of one metaphor or idea. So the limbs are important. And then having an awareness of like the smaller marma points or energy centers throughout the body. It's about opening up the network and the channels, so that the flow of prana or chi or life force, even just simply blood flow and lymph flow, can flow more effectively and efficiently through the body. And it's not like an intense workout necessarily, but it's more, and then feeling and pausing between each exercise, and just taking a moment to feel and observe the benefit now. What is happening now that's integrating as a benefit? Because often we do yoga and then we think in like a month I'll receive the benefits, or I'll see the benefits of my practice. So I always like to invite people to take a moment just to receive after the exercise that they did, because that's how you get to feel what's happening now. And it's really exciting, because you can literally feel the energy increasing, or the blood flow like rushing through your limbs or into your fingertips, or the tension in your upper chest like loosening. It's working and inviting more of that subtle awareness in.
Mm-hmm.
And something really exciting is that Sheena is going to actually provide us with some sessions live in our group.
Yes.
And so coming up this month, I guess, we're going to work on getting that offered. We'll be announcing it in the group as to when. And I don't know, did you want to explain what you were planning to do there, Sheena?
Well, I just was putting it out there for anyone who wanted to join. We could do a yoga class once a week that I would offer for free to the group. And I would start with introducing some of the exercises for the spine, and then we would repeat that each week and add on a little bit more, information and poses or exercises that you can do so that the repetition kind of sinks into the memory of your body, and you're able to access it as a tool that you have where you don't necessarily need someone to teach you anymore. So that's the idea, is through repetition, you get the wisdom of the routine, and it becomes something that you can easily do and access daily. I recommend it daily, or for sure when you notice that your body is feeling stiff or it needs some movement. It's just a really quick and easy thing and powerful thing that you can do to keep yourself aligned, your channels open, and feeling good and feeling that kind of blissful, boost. You can give that to yourself through these exercises. It doesn't take long, and the peace and bliss starts flowing. So, yeah,
That's beautiful.
Right.
So we will announce that days and times in the Facebook group, and what we'll do is when Sheena's available, we'll post that up, and either Cindy or myself will help Sheena get into the group to be able to do that. And we'll also have recordings then of it, and we'll tag those in a room and let you know where those are as well. So Sheena, I think that we've come to the point in our show where I have to ask you if there's anything else specific that you would like our listeners to know about before we do our squirrel shots.
Yeah, so I just thought after to mention for the yoga that I'll be sharing can be done in a chair. So you don't need to be able to sit on the floor for long periods of time, so it can be done seated. Some of the postures, or most of them, can be done standing or in a chair. So it's accessible to everyone. And then lastly, and maybe I could just put this little bit of information in the comments, but we are a bed and breakfast, but we also host retreats out here. So it's our first year and kind of a new business for Robert and I that we've envisioned for about 3 or 4 years now. And it's a big dream that's come true. And I did just want to mention that we're hoping to open in July and book retreats throughout the summer and into the fall. And we're even offering 1 month stays in the winter if you want to kind of take a kind of break from life and just cozy up with a book by the fire in our cottage that's detached from the main house in the woods. Then everyone is most welcome to come. So so I just wanted to mention that as well.
So please definitely place that in the comments underneath or on the thread in the group. I'm sure we'll have people who would be very interested in hearing more. And post all of your contact information and your site in there as well. We would love our listeners to be able to have access to that. Okay, so are you ready for our squirrel shots?
I am, yeah.
Number 1, who do you admire most?
My mother.
Nice. When are you most inspired?
In the morning, at dawn, right before the sun rises.
What's the top destination place on your list?
I want to explore more of the acres and the land that we have here. So I feel on holiday this first year at our new place. So I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
What was your favorite book growing up?
Favorite book growing up? I wasn't much of a reader, but I'll tell you my favorite author in my early, from 20 on. The first author that I really dove into, her name is Lynn Andrews. She's a shaman teacher from, I think, Los Angeles, but she studied with elders in Manitoba, Canada. And she's written so many books. And her books were the first book that I could not put down and I would read from start to finish. So I don't know why, but it ended up being Lynn Andrews, and beautiful journeys and teachings in her books. So
nice.
Yeah.
If you had a yacht, what would you call it? What would you name it?
I missed the start of the question.
If you had a yacht, what would you name it?
A yacht. Gosh. I'm not sure what I would.
That's okay. You don't have to be sure.
Something about dream,
Oh.
dreams, or yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
If you could create a documentary about anything, what would it be about?
Oh God. The documentary would be about returning to nature as the solution to returning to self.
Oh.
And yeah, just a lot that nature teaches us how to align with the original creation and with the thoughts of the creator. And if we can relate to nature or look at it in that way, that all the codes, all the information, the life codes, it's all there. And it just awakens us, back to our original nature. So it would be around that and the idea or concept of co-creation.
Beautiful. What is your favorite type of flower?
Right now we have purple irises in bloom. So I'll say that for today.
Do you have any guilty pleasures?
Chips. I would say, yeah.
Okay,
I'll
and
just
your
leave it there.
last question. The last question I'm going to ask you is, what is your favorite quality in your very best friend?
In what, sorry?
In your very best friend. Your favorite quality of your best friend.
Unconditional acceptance and gentleness.
Beautiful. Now, Cindy has one last question for you before we wrap this up.
If you were able to climb to the highest mountaintop and the whole world could hear you, what would you say?
I would say that you're here to follow the dream of your soul.
Right.
Gosh, that's beautiful. Yeah. So nice. Well, we've come to the point in our show where we have to say goodbye. So I want to thank you, Sheena, for joining us tonight. It's been great to get to know a little bit more about you and a little bit more about your journey and yoga, and to have this offer for our group of some free yoga classes. So thank you again for joining us. And thank you to all of our listeners and viewers for being here as well. We look forward to having you listen in again next week. But for now, have a great week, and we'll see you later. Signing off from TTSN.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.